Dave Talks Comics, Episode 57. Dave Talks Comics is a podcast on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. We talk about comic books I have read and cartoons I have watched. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com or at facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. I talk from my notes on these comics. I don't go panel by panel. I try to do more than just summarize the stories, although now that I think about it, this episode isn't about comic books, it's about cartoons, so I don't go, scene by scene, but I do talk from my notes on these episodes, these cartoons. This podcast is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these cartoons, I may spoil them in some way. I'll probably spoil them in some way. On this episode, I will be talking about the first 5 episodes of Season 2, Justice League Unlimited. JLU Season 2, Episodes 1 through 5. I finally started watching JLU again, and this season kind of picks up in some places. I mean, there's one storyline that kind of runs through seasons 1 and 2, which is the Cadmus storyline, or Project Cadmus, which I believe was a storyline in comic books before it was done on the animated series. But I didn't realize that until later when I was doing some research online. I don't have all the details on that. Maybe I can look that up and add that as an addendum to this. Anyhow, getting to these episodes, I thought it started a little slow, but it picks up very nicely. The first episode is called The Cat and the Canary, and the cat refers to Wildcat and the canary as Black Canary. And basically the 3 heroes that are featured in this one are Wildcat, Black Canary, and Green Arrow. And the story in this one is that Wildcat has been taking part in, I don't know if they're illegal, but they're kind of back alley brawls, or not back alley brawls, but like this underground fight club type scene, which is run by a villain by the name of Roulette, I believe. And I believe also, I think Tala is also involved in this, who is part of Project Cadmus. But basically, Wildcat is feeling kind of like he isn't contributing enough, or like he doesn't have any special powers. He's just a really good fighter. And so he's been taking part in these, and Black Canary's kind of concerned about this. And so she goes after him, and Green Arrow is interested in Black Canary, so he agrees to tag along. And there's some misunderstanding there where Green Arrow thinks that Black Canary is romantically interested in Wildcat, when actually she sees him as more of a father figure or a mentor. And so you get some development in Green Arrow and Black Canary's relationship, which I believe was first hinted at in the first episode of Season 1 of Justice League Unlimited, when Green Arrow saw Black Canary in the locker room, because they have co-ed locker rooms, I guess, or changing areas, I'm not sure, on the Justice League satellite. And so this was an okay episode. It wasn't a bad one. It just didn't pack as much as I like to usually see in one of these episodes. The second episode is called The Ties That Bind, and this one introduces Mr. Miracle and Big Barda. Now, they had some, if you've watched Superman the Animated Series, they had some Fourth World characters, and they are Fourth World. And the Fourth World, of course, refers to the worlds of Apocalypse and New Genesis and all the characters that come from them, like Big Barda and Mr. Miracle, and of course most famously Darkseid, and other characters like Orion, Calabac, Granny Goodness, Werner Wunderbark, and so on and so forth. Desaad. Some of these characters had appeared also in like some of the Super Friends versions of the, although I've seen some of those, but I haven't seen all of those. So this episode introduces Mr. Miracle and Big Barda and Oberon. I believe it's the first time they've shown up, although it's not the first time that the Fourth World has shown up in the Justice League or JLU cartoons. And basically what happens is Oberon is captured by Granny Goodness, and so Big Barda and Mr. Miracle go to rescue him. And it's been a couple weeks since I watched this, and my notes aren't good enough, but basically I think they go to the Justice League for help, and basically nobody's interested in helping them except for the Flash. He agrees to tag along. So they have to travel to Apokolips to rescue Oberon. They kind of make temporary alliances with some of the bad guys like Calabac. There's a kind of an infight going on among Darkseid's lieutenants, I guess you would say, captains, lieutenants, I'm not sure which is correct. But I don't remember all the details of how this hashes out, but basically they end up siding with Calabac, at least temporarily, and it's an okay episode. I wasn't crazy about it. There just wasn't as much character development as I would have liked to see, and I can't remember, but I don't think any of this really pays off. I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of development with Mr. Miracle and Big Barda in future episodes of JLU. Oh, and the one other thing that I noticed, that I always thought that Big Barda was much taller than Mr. Miracle. I don't have the Who's Who handy right now. Maybe I can look this up and see what the Who's Who has to say. But I always thought that Big Barda was much taller than Mr. Miracle, that he was like 5 feet and she was like 6'5" or something like that. And it doesn't look like that big of a height difference in this episode. So maybe I'll look that up and I'll add that as an addendum to this recording. Okay, now the third episode is where I think it really picks up, and I really love this one. And this is where we get back to the Cadmus storyline, because the last two episodes had very little to do, if anything, to do with Cadmus. And you get a couple of cool scenes early in the episode where you have round tables where first I'm not sure which one was first, but you see the bad guys and you see the good guys, the bad guys being the people at Project Cadmus discussing things. And people like Dr. Hugo Strange, I think it is, and Tala, and Professor Hamilton, and I'm drawing a blank as to who else was at that round table. But probably Amanda Waller, because she's certainly involved in this. And then you also have a round table with the 7 original members, or is it just the 6? I'm not sure if Hawkgirl was there. Maybe she was. But, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, of course, Jon Stewart, Green Lantern, The Flash, Martian Manhunter, and possibly Hawkgirl. But it's flashing between the two, so you see one group discussing, you see the other group discussing, and I thought that was a neat kind of effect there. You also get you get an interesting scene where Amanda Waller confronts Batman in the shower. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry, Batman confronts Amanda Waller in the shower. And I think this, to a degree, this is follow-up on that episode from Season 1 of JLU where the one, Ultimatum, which is the one that introduced the Ultimen, which were kind of copies or send-ups or homages to the characters, some of the characters from the original, from the Super Friends cartoon, not the original Super Friends season, but some of the other ones. And she had said to him, something about, we know a lot of things, rich boy, and And so this is kind of him, stepping on her toes the way she was stepping on his toes, I guess. But the I've talked about a lot of things in this episode, but I haven't really talked about what the episode is about. And basically, the Project Cadmus has Doomsday, this villain who appeared in the second season of Justice League. He was in the episode where I'm forgetting the name of the episode, but it's the one where the Justice Lords come down, where the Justice League gets transported, where the Justice League and the Justice Lords end up changing worlds, and the Justice Lords are from a world where the Justice League is evil, and they basically control the Earth. And in that episode, I believe the Superman of the Justice Lords had done something, incapacitated. I believe he lobotomized or something like that. Doomsday? Or am I thinking of this episode? I really have to record these more frequently. Anyhow, Project Cadmus is kind of fiddling with Doomsday, and he escapes and ends up going after Superman. You end up with this knockdown, drag-out fight between Superman and Doomsday, which I just thought was awesome. But you also get this fear-mongering, that this concern that the Justice League could become the Justice Lords. The other thing worth mentioning here is this is basically a spotlight on Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Superman fighting with Doomsday, but Batman and Wonder Woman are basically the two support, because they have to figure out how to take out Doomsday. They need help. You do get a little bit of the other heroes like the Flash and the Green Lantern and the Martian Manhunter, and possibly a few other characters. And I've got a note here that says dissension in the ranks at the top. I mean, and I'm not sure what that means. Wasn't that wonderful? But it definitely feels like a very high-stakes episode, and it's a really good one. It's a really good one. Okay, the fourth episode is Task Force X, and this one is cool because this is kind of an episode where kind of the bad guys win. If you don't know, Task Force X is also known as the Suicide Squad, and it originally appeared in comics back in the 60s, and it was called Task Force X back then, but I wasn't aware of that until I read DC The New Frontier by Darwin Cook, where he refers to them as Task Force X, and then that got me to go back and look and find that, wow, yes, the original Suicide Squad had been called Task Force X. It wasn't something that was just created for the JLU cartoon. And so the bad guys, Task Force X is basically made up of Colonel Rick Flag, Captain Boomerang, Deadshot, Plastique, Clock King, and Amanda Waller. Now, what they decide to do, this is kind of basically a heist or a Mission Impossible type episode, where the focus is on the bad guys, not the good guys. Or you could say the focus is on the government team, Task Force X, as opposed to the superheroes, because as they've been building up in this Cadmus storyline, there's this kind of divide between the Justice League and the U.S. government. And the U.S. government doesn't trust the Justice League, and a lot of it seems to stem from that episode in Season 1 where the Justice League used this weapon to try and, I believe it was Darkheart was the name of the episode, where the Justice League used a weapon that they had, a nuclear-powered weapon, in an attempt to destroy this alien technology, which was threatening to, well, I don't think it had spread all over the world, but it seemed to be spreading at an extremely fast rate. And the government, the Army, General Eiling, I believe it was very... And he's another one, I believe, who was at that round table in the Doomsday Sanction, are very concerned about the Justice League, because the Justice League doesn't report to the U.S. government, and they claim to be doing the right thing, but at the same time, they know, the government knows from having experience with the Justice Lords that anything could happen. And what happens if the Justice League goes rogue? And they keep on, putting that forward. And personally, I don't think they have to worry about that, other than something really strange happening, but like what happened in that episode with the Justice Lords. But at the same time, this is a cartoon, so anything's possible. But so Task Force X, the Suicide Squad is this team that's made up of a mixture of heroes and villains. The villains have been released from prison and have explosive collars. Or was it an explosive collar? That's what it was in the comic books back in the 80s. But I think it was something slightly different, like they'd given them an injection or something like that. Or there was something, I think, buried. They'd implanted something under their skin, which would explode if they tried if they didn't follow orders. And, of course, the bad guys here are Captain Boomerang and Deadshot and Plastique. Colonel Flag is not a villain. He's not a criminal. I believe he's U.S. Air Force, and he's the one who's leading this team. And what they're doing, I mentioned before that there was a heist or a Mission Impossible type setup where they have to. Their plan is to infiltrate the Justice League satellite and steal this set of armor called the Annihilator, which first appeared in Season 1 of JLU. Although that isn't clear at the beginning exactly what they're going up there to do initially. So those four, Flag, Boomerang, Deadshot, and Plastique, go up there to do that. Clock King is kind of the planning guy, and of course Amanda Waller's the overall in control of this. As far as the heroes that are in this episode, you've got Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern, Captain Atom, the Shining Knight, Vigilante, Atom Smasher. Yeah, that's about it. And so all of the action takes place on the satellite it's really neat because you get these heroes, you've got these villains or these government team who isn't as powerful as some of these people, because after all, they're going up against people like Captain Atom and Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter, and they still manage to hold their own in this fight. So that made it pretty cool. On the one hand, some people could say, that's just unrealistic. They couldn't do that. On the other hand, I think it's kind of neat when they can figure out how to do something like that and make it good. So that's basically it for. And like I said, another big takeaway from this, other than this fact that the bad guys win, is that the fact that they're sowing the seeds of you can't trust anyone. And that's why the government is doing what it's doing. Okay, so the final episode I'm going to talk about, the fifth one, is called The Balance. And this is basically a Wonder Woman and Hawkgirl team-up episode. You get the return of a villain from the first season of Justice League, from a story called Paradise Lost, which was the fourth story, or the seventh and eighth episodes of Justice League. And that villain is Felix Faust. And he was kind of killed at the end of that episode and went down to the underworld. So he's kind of back in a spirit form. And he manages to take over the Annihilator armor, which I just mentioned, which Task Force X had stolen in the episode called Task Force X, the previous episode. And the Annihilator armor first showed up in episode 3 of season 3 of Justice League Unlimited, called Hawk and Dove. I don't think that was that great an episode. And honestly, the armor, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of the Destroyer, and I think I might have talked about that from Marvel Comics. The Destroyer was also in the Thor movie, the first Thor movie. It's this, suit of armor that seems inanimate, although in this episode, Felix Faust manages to take over it. You've got some nice humorous bits in this episode. with the Flash, where he tries to broker a peace between Wonder Woman and Hawkgirl, because Wonder Woman, ever since the end of Justice League, that final story in Justice League, Starcross, where Hawkgirl basically betrayed the Earth to her home, betrayed the Earth to the forces from her home planet Thanagar. Ever since then, most of the Justice Leaguers have forgiven her for that, but Hawkwoman is definitely one of the ones who is not. And they haven't been talking. And so what Flash does is he arranges to have lunch with both of them, but doesn't tell either one of them that he's going to, that he's having lunch, that all three of them are going to be there. So that doesn't work out too well. But that doesn't last too long, because then something happens. There's something going on that's affecting superheroes who use magic as their power base, I guess you could say, or as their... So, for instance, you see Jason Blood, the Demon, a.k.a. the Demon. What's the Demon's real name? The Demon is... the Demon. Jason Blood. I can't remember what the Demon's name is, but... so you see Martian Manhunter trying to help Jason Blood, and he keeps switching back and forth between the Demon and Jason Blood. And then you see some other magic-based superheroes like Dr. Fate and Zatanna, and they've chained them down because they're, I guess, something's wrong. And this adds this. Okay, so one thing I think about, kind of a sidebar about Zatanna that I've always had a problem with the cartoons, maybe I've mentioned this before in one of my other commentaries, is that her backwards talking power, because what she can do is she can do magic by saying words backwards, saying commands backwards. She can make things happen. It works great in a comic book, where you can hold the book up to a mirror, or maybe you can read it backwards without having to hold it up to a mirror. But in a cartoon, it just doesn't work, because how are you supposed to know what she's saying? I mean, there's no chance to know what she's saying. So I've always kind of had a problem with that. But when I was doing some research on this episode online, I went to the worldsfinestonline.com, and I went to this episodes page, and they've got some sound bites there, including one where they have played the sound backwards so you can hear what she's actually saying, which makes me want to go back and find the other episodes that she was in and see what she said in those episodes. So that's really cool. I just can't believe that. I've known about this website for years, and I'm surprised that this is the first time I've actually noticed that they had, that they did that. But anyway, so that's so something's going wrong. Then Wonder Woman gets a visit from Hermes, the messenger of the gods, who's also a god himself, and he's delivering a message from Zeus saying that Wonder Woman needs to go to Tartarus, which is where Hades lives, the god of the underworld. And so she's ready to go, but she wants to take some weapons with her, and she thinks, what would be really good is Hawkgirl's mace, because Hawkgirl's mace disrupts magic. It's not affected by magic, and it can impact magic. It's not, I guess, science-based. And that's been shown in a couple other episodes, like Wake the Dead, and which was the one where Hawkgirl kills, or Mercy kills, basically, in the end. Spoilers, Solomon Grundy. And so she wants the mace, and she basically breaks into Hawkgirl's room on the satellite and is ready to take it when Hawkgirl shows up and says, no, you can't take the mace. If you want the mace, I come with it. So Hawkgirl and Wonder Woman travel to the underworld, Tartarus, to to take on Felix Faust, who in the Annihilator armor has taken over the underworld, has captured Hades and taken over the underworld. Never mind how this happens. You'd think Hades should be much more powerful than this, and it seems a little strange to me. But anyhow, there are some nice humorous moments here, and I can't remember any right now, even though I just watched this episode. I mentioned that there's some humor with The Flash. I mentioned that before. The only other thing that I think is really worth mentioning here is that you also get to see, there's a very brief appearance by Abnegazar, Wrath, and Ghast, who are these three demons who have appeared. I know they appeared in Justice League way back when. I used to have an issue of Justice League that I found at a flea market. The cover had been ripped off, and wait, was that the episode that they were in? Oh, wait, I'm not sure. No, I don't think that was the one, no. But they did appear in one. I think Modru was in it, who has been in a previous episode of Justice League Unlimited in the first season. I think it was called The Greatest Story Never Told. And also, and they appear, I think it was the team up that they had. It was the Justice League, Justice Society, Legion of Superhero team up. I'm not sure what year that was, but it was probably the mid to late 70s. Sometime in there. Maybe I can add that in the addendums. That gives me at least 3 things to talk about. But there's a brief appearance by them, and they kind of help Wonder Woman and Hawkgirl, pointing them in the right direction as to where to find Felix Faust. So that's about it. I'm 5 episodes in. There's, I believe, 8 more in Season 2 of JLU. And as I recall it, Season 2 was, originally that was going to be it, and so there kind of is an ending. But then they decided to do a Season 3, and so they kind of did a whole new story, which had absolutely nothing to do with the Cadmus storyline. But I'll get to that when I get to that. So anyway, I think these episodes are worth watching, especially the Doomsday Sanction, Task Force X, and The Balance. And I enjoyed them back then, and I enjoyed them all over again this time. A few more things about those first few episodes of Justice League Unlimited from Season 2. First, Project Cadmus. Project Cadmus first appeared, it was a creation of Jack Kirby's. First appeared in Jimmy Olsen number 133, which I think I might have, which is cover dated October 1970. Now, there have been multiple iterations of Project Cadmus. It was kind of redone after the Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985-86. Well, that's when Crisis on Infinite Earths was. I think it was 1988 or something like that when they brought it back, post-Crisis. So if you really want to read about all that, you should see Wikipedia for the details, which includes details about this iteration of Project Cadmus in the Justice League Unlimited cartoon. Second thing, Mr. Miracle and Big Barda. I was wrong. They're much closer in height than I thought they were. According to the original edition of Who's Who, Mr. Miracle is 6 feet tall and Big Barda is 6'2". I thought that she was much taller than him than that, but I guess not. Next, okay, there were some details I definitely missed on that third episode, the Doomsday Sanction, which really was probably my favorite of these 5. And for starters, how did Doomsday escape? Well, this is kind of funny. Dr. Milo gets demoted, and Dr. Milo is the one who's responsible for experiments on Doomsday. Apparently he gets demoted for something about he did some experiments that weren't too successful on a superpowered warthog or something like that. And so Amanda Waller demotes him. But of course, the first thing you should do when you do that is you take away somebody's access. You don't just... So anyway, so Dr. Milo goes into the lab. He releases Doomsday. Doomsday goes crashing out of there, and next thing you know, he's fighting with Superman. That was a classic example of not knowing how to handle a situation by, I guess, Amanda Waller. I don't know. I guess he was demoted. He wasn't fired, but still, you got to be careful with these things, people. The other thing I wanted to say about this episode was about, it's kind of two things. First off, the Batman-Superman split. That's what I was referring to, or that's what I meant in my notes when I said about dissension at the ranks at the top. Superman basically deals with Doomsday in a very, he kind of passes judgment on him. They capture him finally. He passes judgment on him and then sentences him, without taking it to any other sort of authority. And Batman has problems with that. And, basically he says, and maybe these are the exact words he uses, maybe they're right. That, he's questioning the fact that the Justice League, and actually Superman in this case, is acting unilaterally. So maybe they put it to a vote in front of the 7 core members, but I'm not sure. And that's kind of interesting considering how Batman has been portrayed sometimes in the comic books, where it makes him sound like the person who's, in this episode, it makes him sound like he's the one who's more open, who is more open to the notion of doing things, to the notion of oversight, that they shouldn't be an ultimate authority. And whereas in the comic books, he's sometimes portrayed as somebody who thinks he knows what's best and he knows how to handle a situation. He's kind of the fascist or the... I don't know. Fascist isn't the right word, but he has no problem with spying on people. He has no problem with keeping surveillance on people. He has no problem with acting in a way that he feels like he knows what's best, which is basically what Superman is doing here, that we're doing it for their good, and so that's kind of interesting. And the final thing about this episode is that what I really enjoyed was that is Batman saving the day, in a way, at the end. I mean, Superman is dealing with Doomsday, but then the U.S. government launches a nuclear missile at the island, the volcanic island, where Superman and Doomsday are fighting, because they think that they don't want to risk the chance that Superman gets beaten by Doomsday. Because remember, Doomsday is the one who killed Superman, right? And they don't want to deal with that again. And so they figured, we'll launch a nuclear missile at this island, and that should take care of Doomsday. If it kills Superman, oh well. And Batman is the one who comes to the rescue there, and I'm not going to go into the details, but at extreme risk to himself, he prevents the missile from crashing into the island. A couple final notes. I couldn't remember what the demon's real name is. It's Etrigan. Of course I remembered as soon as I finished recording. And the other thing I mentioned also in relation to the 5th episode, The Balance, the 3 demons, Abnegazar, Wrath, and Gast, they first appeared in Justice League of America number 10, and they had another appearance at 10 and 11, and then also in 35. But what I was thinking of was Justice League of America 147 and 148, which was the crossover with the Legion of Superheroes and the Justice Society of America. I had that first issue, 147. I don't know if I've ever had or read issue 148, but that was one that I picked up. I'm not sure where, but I'm not sure if I picked it up. Probably because it was a crossover with the Justice Society, and I was kind of into that stuff because I was reading All-Star Squadron back then, and so I was interested in all things Earth 2 at that point. And So they figured into that story along with Modru, who's another magic-based, another sorcerer, I guess. So that's it for my thoughts on my addendum to the first 5 episodes of Season 2 of JLU. That's it for episode 57 of Dave Talks Comics. If you're looking for more information about comic books, then I recommend checking out comicbookdb.com and the Grant Comics database, which can be found at comics.org. I use both of them on a very regular basis when preparing to record podcasts. If you're looking for more information about DC Animated Universe cartoons like Justice League Unlimited, then I recommend checking out worldsfinestonline.com, and I will provide a link in the show notes. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about the 3rd volume of the Doom Patrol Archives. That is the Silver Age Doom Patrol, the original Doom Patrol series. Questions or comments can be posted on the episode page at davetalkscomics.com or at facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.
They're in agony. What can we do?
I'm researching. As soon as I've learned something, I'll let you know.
All is lost. Faust sits on the throne of hell.